Uh, Good morning, ma'am. Good to see you again. Just with regard to this issue of wage increases and the implication that they could be a driver of inflation, could you speak on the relationship between increases in wages and productivity? And if you have an increase in work productivity, you can also have increases in wages that are not inflationary. Could you comment on that?
Well, that is certainly true. And often, instead of looking at just wages, we would look at a different measure called unit labor costs, which compounds together both productivity or output per hour and wage or compensation costs. And that's a broader measure, taking account of productivity, of what does it cost, or how is the cost changing over time, of what firms need to pay basically to produce a certain amount of output. So certainly productivity is a key factor, and not only wages. Over the last several years, what we have seen is that real wages, or wages in real terms, are not growing as fast as productivity.
Yeah, thank you for making that point. I was going to ask you, but you anticipated my question, which is that, we have room for wage increases given our rate of productivity in this economy. And I would argue that our wages are depressed and and sometimes you need government to intervene in labor markets through a minimum wage in order to catch up, because there's no equality of bargaining power given the decline of union representation in our country. Anyway, I have to ask you a question on behalf of my constituents. I represent a very large percentage of people whose roots are in Somalia, and very proud to represent that community. One of the problems we've been having is that because of certain regulations like the Patriot Act, Bank Secrecy Act, and others, that the regulatory, I hate to use the term regulatory burden because that sounds so Republican, but but the regulatory burden, okay, it's my move on bipartisanship today, is that a lot of the banks that facilitate these money wiring transfers are opting out of that market. Usually we're not talking about them remitting a lot of money, and the banks tell me they do it, but it's just expensive, and the liability associated with making a mistake is pretty high when it comes to having to do all the documentation of knowing your customer. What could be done? Because we got hardworking people who are trying to send money back home to their families, and our government correctly is trying to stop terrorism financing, which I completely support. But in so doing, a lot of folks are very hard pressed to get money back home. Could you speak to this issue?
Well, this is an issue that the Federal Reserve has been aware of, and it's been discussed, I know, on an interagency basis for a number of years. It is certainly a legitimate need to make remittances to Somalia, and I think part of the issue is with the need to also manage money laundering and terrorist financing risks. This is a hard issue. I'd say the Federal Reserve, I think it's important to understand the Federal Reserve absolutely does not prohibit businesses from providing remittances to Somalia to the extent that the banks we supervise are involved with customers who are in this business. We would supervise to make sure that they are abiding with BSA AML requirements, but we are not prohibiting banks from serving the needs of these customers. Now, it's a decision that they make whether or not they want to take risks. And, I know this is not the only area where this comes up. Some firms may be reluctant to undertake those risks.
Well, let me. Forgive me, Madam Chairman, because time's running short. But I think that one of the ways to solve this problem is for maybe some developed governments like ours to engage with the Somali government, which seems to be getting its feet on the ground, and help them stand up their central banking system so that it can meet international standards. I think this would be very good money well spent to help them get their processes in order, so that, because every penny that Somali Americans send to their families is a penny we don't have to send in foreign aid. But we're not going to stand by and let people starve, so we will step in if we need to. And remittances take a lot of pressure off. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman is